What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to JG's Lounge. I am still dealing with some camera quality stuff and lighting issues, but I think I kind of want to upgrade. So I'm looking around, doing some shopping. So I'm still doing the show here, and I'm super excited. JG's Lounge is still doing great. Been pretty consistent as far as views, so I'm definitely not complaining because they're not going down. They're just kind of staying steady. And I haven't really been consistent with putting out shows lately. The last few weeks, there's been a lot of going on, I think, with everybody. So shows have been kind of scarce, but they're still there, guys. I'm still putting out content, and we love you guys. We want you all to keep watching, so we'll continue doing what we do, and hopefully get back into a normal flow in the next few weeks. With that being said, welcome to another episode of Singed Eye Sockets right here on JG's Lounge. I'm your host, Jukebox Ginger, and we got a hell of a show tonight, but let's introduce the guest again, who everybody probably already knows who follows JG's Lounge. We got Sean Shank, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Now, folks, what he's not telling you is that his OnlyFans is thriving. Thriving.
It's really true.
It's a lot of feet and syrup being poured on feet. That's all I know.
You know, I have like this playlist of called Hobbit feet, and it's just, I mean, it's just, people like hairy feet, man. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm good, man. I've had a lot of life stuff, but we all do. And the spring semester for my schools that I teach at is winding down, so I'm gonna have a little bit of downtime, and I'm gonna try to get caught up on domestic things. And also, I've been having some technical stuff too. So like I've not been putting out content like I normally do. So I'm going to get caught back up on that pretty soon because I've been, I feel an itch. It's like I've got stuff to do, and I realize, it's tough to do without the proper equipment. So
that's so true. It's really hard to get any of good quality stuff. And when I make the clips, I zoom in and I crop, and it starts to blur the images. And I think it's more about the words that I'm trying to get across and the clips than the quality of the video. But it's nice to have good quality video to go along with it. So, I mean, I'm trying to find ways to adapt and improve on that as well.
Well, we just need to start making that huge, money from all the subscribers. And then you get that nice, like Joe Rogan Experience 2-camera thing going.
Yeah. We can do shows anywhere in the world to make it look like we're in the same room.
Yeah, there you go, man.
So for everybody, tonight we are talking about the murder of 18-year-old Hae Min Lee. She was went missing on January 13th of 1999. And her body was found February 22nd of 1999 in Lincoln Park, and it's in Baltimore, Maryland. And so sort of a timeline of how the day went, and we're going to get into this kind of little step by step, and you know how I am. I'm kind of all over the place. But you did admit that you are unaware of this case, correct?
I have no idea, but since it went down in Baltimore, Maryland, the first suspect at the top of my list is old Johnny Hopkins. Just gonna throw that out there.
Well, Hae Min Lee is a high school student. She is part of the magnet program. She's a pretty intelligent kid. It's like basically more of your advanced students kind of thing. Did a lot of sports, was very involved in her family. She was, every day she'd get off school, she'd go get her cousins from school, take them home. And actually the reason that she was a report of her being missing was because she never went to pick up her cousin from school that day. She was supposed to be there like 3:45, never showed up. So her parents got a call saying, "Hey, this child's still here. Is she coming to get him?" And that's kind of how it started. But what we do know is that she left school. There is video footage of her leaving the school at 2:15 p.m. on January 13th. And between that time and February 22nd, it was all just sort of a hearsay. Nobody knows what happened. Now, when they found her in the park, it was an anonymous report by somebody going by the name Mr. S. Is how they've identified him. That's all we know in any reports. This guy was on his way to work, had to pee, went in the woods, found her body. Now, he was less than a mile away from work, and he went several hundred yards into the park to pee, which doesn't make sense to me right off the bat.
What do you mean by several hundred? Because, like, I have stopped in an emergency to pee on the side of like a busy highway, and I have gone, over into a holler just to not be, discovered. When I was younger and much, had, I don't know, what do they call that, dignity and things.
Yeah.
Now I don't care, but back then I would go a good distance in to get, some good coverage.
Make sure you're not going to get caught.
Yeah, but
Well,
I mean,
my thing is if he was driving to work and he was less than a mile away from work, why would he stop to walk that far into the woods? And then you just so happen to see part of the body. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's kind of curious. He actually wasn't even a suspect, but I wanted to throw out how she was found, and that's how she was found.
That's incredibly suspect. I mean,
it is.
I'm sorry, that's incredibly suspect, and the fact that they just accepted it that on its face is a little bit weird.
Yeah, and the way that when the investigators and everybody showed up, they had a hard time even finding the body. So it's kind of, I don't know, that to me is pretty sketchy in itself. And again, this is a cold case in a sense because they've narrowed it down to potentially 2 people, but they don't know who did it. And it's still actually not proven on which one is, but we'll get into that later into this. So she had a recent breakup with her boyfriend of a decent period of time. His name is Adnan Syed. He was actually convicted in February of 2000 for the murder of her. It was a few weeks after the trial, or after they found the body. Based on the testimony of one of his friends, his name is Jay Wilds. Now, the testimony of Jay Wild is very weird to me. But I want to point out that Adnan Syed is of Muslim descent, and this is 99. And there is, obviously racial issues to kind of get into this. And Hae Min Lee had a journal where she kind of talked about her relationship with him and how happy she was. But then towards the end, when they broke up, she said that he was a possessive boyfriend, and it never said that he was aggressive, like physically, but that he was possessive. And this was just shortly after their breakup that this went down, that she ended up going missing. And she was dating a new guy. Now, Jay Wilds, a friend of his, who they never say in any of the interviews that they were necessarily like friends, like they hung out all the time. They just kind of were in the same crowd of people. Jay Wilds was sort of a go-to drug dealer. And Adnan smoked, she smoked. They kind of hung around that crowd of people. And their relationship, Hae being Korean and him being Muslim, was almost sort of secret to the family for a lot of religious reasons. Right. So most of the testimony is based on the friends. And Jay Wilds' testimony is what convicts Adnan. So I want to start out with Jay's testimony of this whole case. So on the day, and he doesn't even get interviewed until like the 26th of February. So body's been found already. All this stuff's going down, right?
Right. It's just that this all seems very convoluted. Like she was seen at 2:15, is missing by 3:45 at least, because that's when she was supposed to pick the kid up.
Yes.
And then she's found in several. Okay.
It's about 6 weeks later.
6 weeks later, but you said several hundred yards. A yard is 3 feet.
Yes.
So if you're talking 100 yards, which is a football field, that's 300 feet. If it's several hundred, we could assume at least several hundred yards. I would say 3 football fields in.
Mm-hmm. So this is it's a city park, so it's not like.
I know, it's just this right off the get. There's a bunch of stuff that's just seeming really suspect about the whole thing. And this Mr. S that called in, I know I'm sidetracking, but
no, it's fine.
My brain is going back to this, this doesn't make any sense. And I agree with the whole. And you probably are going to wrap around back to this later, but it's just. But you said he was never a suspect, right?
No, he was never announced. Actually, the only one that was ever really looked into was Adnan Syed.
Okay, all right.
They didn't do a ton of digging, and that's a big part of. As of today, he was released. He was released at the end of 2023. And it's still, he's like under house arrest because they're still doing some, there's still court things going on. But he was cleared of the murder as of now. They're still looking into this case. But the reason why it was booked was based off Jay's testimony. So let's get into this Jay's testimony.
Yeah, okay.
So on the day of the January 13th of 1999, Jay's testimony was that Adnan had picked him up to take him to school at like 10:15 in the morning. And we actually have a timeline here. I'm going to share this timeline here. This is cell phone pings from the AT&T towers. Now, again, this is 99, so cell phones are still pretty new.
Right.
Okay. He says that around 10 in the morning, he calls Jay, which is true. He picks him up and takes him to school. So they do actually have proof that he was at the school based off the cell phone towers.
Right. Sure.
He says around 2:36, he gets a call from Jay saying to meet up with him. So between 2:15 and 2:30. So he meets up with Jay around 2:30. And I don't remember. Yeah, he picks him up from like a Best Buy parking lot. And he gets in the car and says, I killed her. I did it. I killed her. I killed Hae. And he basically blackmails him and says, if you don't help me dispose of her body, then I'm going to, call you out on the weed dealing you've been doing. So Jay's manipulated into this situation. He says he tells him he never sees Jay's car at the time, but that's where her body is. It's stored in the trunk of her car. And they don't go get it until 7:15, where they get the car. They're at the park around 7:15 at night. And that's when they bury her.
Where was the car? Was it in Best Buy?
So Jay says he never saw it, but he was pretty sure it was in that vicinity because he met Adnan at the park at 7:00, where they buried the body, and then he went and hid the car and then met up with Jay, who drove them away. This is around 7:15.
Okay. I understand now.
Okay.
This is so convoluted that the police just went, fuck it. He's guilty. There are too many facts to get through. I've got to go home and watch Hill Street Blues. Oh, wait, this is 99?
Yeah.
It's just like, what is going on here? Okay.
So it does have cell phone pings of Lincoln Park at 7:09, 7:16. So there's that proof. Okay. They have evidence now linking his phone to those towers. Now, however, later on, what they don't tell you, and this was actually considered a Brady violation, was that the AT&T fax report says that you cannot base location on incoming calls, which means that the incoming calls could be pinging from other towers. So somebody could have called Adnan and pointed him at that tower, even though he could have potentially not been there, which an alibi said that they had been hanging out with him earlier in the day whenever this whole thing went down. Okay. And they also never used that or even brought that alibi to the stand. So there's a lot of things that, yeah, there was an alibi that said that he was in the library around that time that he supposedly killed Lee, and they met up at 2:30 ish whenever he had apparently killed Lee. There is an alibi saying that no, he was actually at the library at the school, but they never brought that witness to the stand.
So far, this kid was convicted solely on the testimony of the dude that went to a Best Buy parking lot allegedly and picked him up, and that's it. Even though there's evidence to the contrary that the dude wasn't even in the vicinity. He was being wholesome and studying in a library.
Yes. And Jay's story does change several times throughout the trial. It's almost like they find more evidence and then his story kind of twists. But it almost seems like they're trying to make it him. Like they're after Adnan throughout this whole case. Because in the first interview with Jay, they mentioned the clothes that she was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Jay had mentioned that they ditched the clothes, but then when they found the car, the clothes were in the back seat of the car. And then he had changed the story to, oh, well, Adnan had just tossed the clothes in the bag. Later, after this whole thing is done, years later, he comes out and says the reason why my story was so shaky is because, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to let him know, what I didn't want him to know. Me being a weed dealer, I didn't want the people who were innocent, their names being brought up and blah, stuff like that. Just stuff that didn't really make sense. And then basically he said, once they said, we're not coming after you for your weed crap, we just want to know what happened. And then he kind of opened up, and that's when his story came out, the truth of what happened. However,
okay, I'm sorry, please continue.
No, you got anything?
No, it just doesn't. It's a whole lot of doesn't make clear sense as to, there all of a sudden there's more facts. And then you're saying that seemingly his testimony is like bending and swerving to try to meet those facts, but then the facts aren't matching up on the back end. And this guy lost 23 years of his life to this.
Yep. And
okay,
which is really weird in my mind, and that's mostly because like it's almost does seem like a race thing. Like the reason why they were after him was because of his race. Like, I mean, I hate to say that, like, we do know, like, a lot of Muslim religious background, is and how like the relationship works between the man and the woman. Primarily, it seems to be more of like the man leading the relationship kind of thing. And I don't know that. I mean, that's true, and that's not me trying to go after anybody or anything, because whatever.
That's culturally accurate. That's not.
Yes.
Let's not get all worried and woke here.
But there's nobody pointed out that he was aggressive towards her, though.
Right.
Jay just mentioned that before this all went down, that he was upset because he knew that she was dating this new guy, Don. Which there's another thing. Don, who wasn't even a suspect, they couldn't even reach him until 1:30 that morning after she was missing. And he reported that he worked at Lens Crafters, which is a eyeglass company.
I'm aware of
Lens. I don't know any that are open at 1:30 in the morning.
That's what I was going to say. There's like, no. I work in the emergency wing of Lens Crafters where, I need bifocal stat.
Yes. So they look into it on the second round of the trial. They don't even look at this as an actual option until the second trial. And they get a hold of Lens Crafters, the company, and they say, well, he's actually not on the time card for his store to be working at that day. And then miraculously, the court asks for the records, and within a couple of days, something shows up that he was at another location working underneath a different employee ID card at that shift that never existed. And then it turns out that store owner happens to be the girlfriend of his mom. And his mom runs the Lens Crafters that he initially works at.
Okay, man, I am so lost.
I
Like,
know it's all over the place, man. It's they don't even look at this guy as a suspect. His current boyfriend, when she disappeared, they couldn't get a hold of him until 1:30 the next
who is the detective on this thing? Barney Fife? I mean, what the hell is going on, dude?
day.
I would
Hey, I do
be
want to give a shout out to the 7 people that are watching right now. Hey, jump in the comments if you're familiar with this case, please. I would love to get you guys involved.
okay. I need some context. First of all, where's this going down?
Baltimore, Maryland, South Side Baltimore,
Okay, that's
Maryland.
right, Baltimore, Maryland. Which I mean, that's a fairly. I mean, okay, so 1999. That's 25 years
Yeah.
ago. It's a quarter of a century.
Uh,
But still, it's a bigger city, so it's. I would say it's slightly more progressive, and it was pre 9/11, so the anti-Muslim sentiment was not as heavy in the air. I would assume
right.
in that area of the country, but still, this. I mean, the way most of this has been railroaded, which is what it seems
So
like it
far.
is.
Hmm.
So far, yeah, I would say that you're probably right. This does seem like it's very much race based.
Yeah.
You know, if they're because I mean they are turning a. It's like there was a dude standing there with how was she uh how was she killed first of all?
Okay. Let's get into that. Okay. So again, we've discussed that Dawn isn't even a suspect in any of this, and kind of the weirdness behind that.
Right, making
And
a
I want
lot
to
of
I want to
sense
wrap
before
that up with when they called the corporate office. They said that schedules had to be written a week prior to that pay period.
Mhm.
So in order for them to have fabricated it, they could have known that he was going to be looked at and fabricated and altered like a time card specifically for him.
That
So
so
it's a
that
possibility
suggests
that yes, and that's
premeditation.
yes. So out of like the 6 or 7 different shows that I listened to and the documents that documents that I've read, that's all the information we have on Don. That's it. And then he's never even considered a suspect.
It, okay, all right.
So she was found laying on her right side
Mm-hmm.
in the grave. Now, are you actually? I'm pretty sure you are, and I'll let you explain this to the people listening. Do you know what full avidity is?
Are you? I mean, are you talking rigor mortis? Like the
Yes.
okay, so rigor sets in. I think it's 2 hours after the death, and then it hangs in for about 12 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And when you're
Mhm.
talking full rigor, I mean they lock up, like the body is frozen in place. I was an EMT for in another time in my life, and we had to go transport a lady who was in full rigor. And the way she had passed, you know how when an insect dies, it curls up.
Yes.
Her arms were like this. I don't know if she was holding a pillow when she died or what it was, but when we got there, her arms were like this and literally had to. And she was this old lady. We picked her up like a suitcase, like it was a handle,
Right.
and put her in to the cot. Right. So
Right.
yeah, I've had experience.
So do you know what lividity is though? Like full lividity?
Full avidity.
So
My brain.
lividity is how they can determine the positions that the body was laid in or moved based on the settling of the blood.
Oh, something. Yeah. Where the blood
Yes.
drops. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember that.
So she was found. It takes 8 to 12 hours for the full lividity to take effect, and but anything prior to that, it can kind of skew. Like the blood flow can redirect based on how you're moving the bodies, and that's kind of how they can determine, that kind of stuff. Well, she had full purple and blue on her face, her stomach, fronts of her legs, so it looked like she had been laying flat.
In front of face down.
Yes,
So,
face
yeah.
down.
Yep.
Full lividity, face down.
Okay.
Immediately contradicts Jay's story because he says that she was killed and stored in the trunk of the car, which they didn't come back and bury until 7 p.m. Even if that was the case and she was killed at 2:30, in order for her to have full lividity on the front of her body, it would have had to have been at least midnight. And she would
Not
have
to,
been laying flat.
yeah, and unless she was a hobbit, That's not going to be happening in the back of a trunk of a car.
Right. She was found on her right side, buried, but all the blood had pulled to her front side. Yes. So that squashes literally the whole timeline of the story that Jay gave right there. And that's not based on doing any digging. That's based on facts.
So, all right. So you've got the one dude lying, and then you've got the new guy, Don, whose mother's girlfriend's half sister, twice removed, lied about his lens crafting job under another employee's tag number at the store that was making glasses at 2:00 in the morning because of emergency glass situation. Dude, this is what the fuck? Like,
it's a totally a what the fuck story.
None of this makes
Jay
sense.
wasn't even considered a suspect. I think it's mostly because he cooperated with the cops. That's just my opinion of it.
It sounds like he just gave him some bullshit story that they were happy.
And here's another thing that kind of gets me, which I wouldn't be surprised if Jay, and I'm not even trying to clear Adnan of this case, but based on the testimony that got him put away, just the lividity aspect in itself squashes that whole timeline.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
And it almost makes you wonder if she was stored somewhere else up until recently before that 6 weeks.
Well, I mean, if you're
because the way that the timeline that he's saying, in order for that to have been accurate, that would have been meant that he took her body there right after he killed her and laid her flat and hid her underneath some bushes, and maybe they went back and dug the hole at 7:15 and then went back later that night and put her. But I don't think that he would have just stored the body just out in public face down.
How was she killed?
Strangulation.
Was there bruising on the back?
No, there is actually no signs of any altercation other than the strangulation. And there was no decomposition. This is 6 weeks after. In January, in Maryland, there were winter storms. There were no animals chewing on a body. None of that.
Oh, there were. Okay, so no animals whatsoever. Okay. But this was in a park she was found? Okay. I'm going to take a swing at this.
Okay.
My thinking is that this J kid did it, not Dawn. I think Dawn got scared because he either found something out or he knew something happened. So all of a sudden, mom or her girlfriend were covering for this. And what happened is Jay somehow got her from behind, garroted, right?
Right.
And dropped her. And I can't, unless she was in some sort of, because if like you picture strangulation from behind, no signs of struggle or anything like, there's no head wounds, so it's just the strangling. It just sounds like she strangled, choke, passes out, drops her forward. She's dying in the snow. Lividity happens, and it either happened in the park, right? Where she's out there and killed her there and just dropped her. But the problem with that is, even in the winter, there are animals out and about, even in city parks and things, that would be nibbling on her. Right?
Yep.
So that tells me that she got dumped, like basically unceremoniously tossed into some sort of storage meat locker or something. Because I can't think.
Well, and here's a little bit more.
Okay.
So part of Jay's story was that when they found the car, which they found the car because Jay told them where it was, that the windshield wiper lever was broken off. And Jay said that from what he was told is that during the strangulation that Hae had kicked it off.
Kicked it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now they sent this piece off for investigation and found out there was no fracture on the piece. It was removed. And the reason it was removed is because it's the only way to access the ignition switch on her style of vehicle, which means somebody was hot wiring the vehicle. Now, on top of that, in this parking lot, in this abandoned parking lot where they found it, there are other cars. It is a grass overtaken parking lot. Her car, where they found it, had full patches of green grass underneath it. If her car had been stored there for 6 weeks, you would have seen a lot of dead grass. They said there was grass coming through the wheel well, and everything underneath it was still green. So that, on another note, means that the car was not there for the full 6 weeks. It was brought there at some point later on.
What is going on?
And I think that if Jay didn't do it, he at least knows who really did do it. And he's covering up the story. Or helping cover it up.
But okay, so they didn't have the keys to her car, so they removed the lever to hotwire the car, drove the car to this lot like it was there the whole time, right?
Right.
Okay. So that kind of tracks.
Yes. And then Hae also had a pager. This is 99, so pagers were still sort of a thing. And she had told a friend before she left school that she was going to meet somebody. But that's as far as we know. So the pager's missing. Nobody ever found the pager. So she could have been meeting some random guy that nobody knows about. But then Jay's fabrication of the story has got to be some sort of a cover-up of something.
Yeah, the thing is, all right, so we have like a preponderance of nebulous varied evidence that makes there's very little connective tissue.
Right. And then that's it. That's the thing is, and the funny thing is they didn't run DNA on almost anything. They found Adnan's fingerprints on like a book in her car, but again, they dated. So it's, he had been in the car before. Now, let's jump to what got him out of prison after 23 years.
What, you mean like a pile of bullshit that doesn't add up to
2013, they got DNA results. 2013, which is ridiculous to me. You got the DNA results from her body and some of the clothing on her body. There were 2 distinct DNAs, and neither one of them was Adnan's. Adnan's DNA was nowhere on her body. That's what cleared him and got him out of prison 23 years later.
So whose DNA was on her body?
They have not released the names of who they were. It does say that they are both in prison right now. One of them was a rapist, and the other one, I don't remember what it was, but they were related to the parking lot owner of where her car was.
So, so this whole time, what if? How about this? Holy shit. Okay. So Jay thinks Don did it. Don thinks Jay did it. Jay thinks that Adnan did it, right? Everybody thinks everybody did it. It was actually some skeezy rapist that was related to this parking lot owner, right? Who would know how that particular model to hotwire it, right? If they're like towing cars, all that shit. Wouldn't that be crazy if it was those guys and it had nothing to do with all these other people who were pointing fingers at each other and trying
that's
to
what I think it is. That's exactly what I think happened.
Dude.
Yeah, I don't
So
I don't think that any of them, I think it was just a bunch of high school drama that they got caught up in, and they were either enjoying it or they were scared and fabricating stories. That's my view on it. And again, I'm not going to say Adnan didn't do it. I'm not going to say that he didn't know the person or get somebody involved to do it for him. That could have easily happened. But
yeah, but just because you're controlling and you come from a
yes,
culture that is very, masculine forward. Okay.
mhm,
Mexican culture is very masculine forward. I've spent time down in Mexico and things, and
right,
I've experienced that culture in the country. Um, but that being said, those harsh generalizations were like, well, of course, he's Muslim, so he must have, if he lost control, he killed her. It's like, no, right?
right.
Um, I Okay, first of all, is there any more? Are there any nuggets
No,
you're hiding?
no, this is it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm still kind of caught up on. I want to know more about why Don's story is the way that it was. Like,
Hmm.
why did they decide that Don, like, I don't know, like, why did they look into him or anything? I don't believe that he was one of the suspects because they would have listed his name as a suspect. They did say
Right.
those two people had both been arrested and had previous charges of certain things. And then there was also something that came up about a murder in the same park a year prior to that to an 18-year-old girl from that same high school with similar situations. So it could have literally been just a one of these guys that they've found the DNA of that had nothing to do with this group of kids.
I think that's the case. I mean, because okay, so if we take Don and separate him away from
Mhm.
this morass, right?
Right.
It could have simply been such a stupid story that the cops are like, dude, no, it's like this is
Mhm.
just silliness. We know better,
Mhm.
and they had what they would call a good suspect or a good lead. And if there was a bias against this kid because of his being Muslim, then they probably looked over a lot of stuff, right?
Well, and
But
the fact that they took the testimony of this drug dealer too. I mean, it's not like even in the interview he talks about, he's like, well, I wasn't selling nickels and dimes. Like I actually had some connections and I knew some people. And that's why he was fabricating the story because he didn't want to give out information or names on people that weren't involved. And blah. It's like, all right, this guy's clearly got some criminal background.
mhm,
And instead of going after him, you're now utilizing him and almost using a fear tactic to make him say the things that you guys want to imprison this innocent guy. Now, again, I'm not saying innocent. I did say it, but I don't know for sure because he could have been involved still. I don't know.
could have been, or it could have been a thing where they found a good patsy. All
Yes.
right. Nobody's going to question it because the kid's Muslim. So toss him in the clink. Who gives a
Yep.
shit? Now they've got a mid level drug dealer that's not some street thug. He's actually pushing some weight. So now
Mhm.
they've got him to inform on people, and they're still letting him do his thing, but they're also, getting
Mhm.
information off him on the side and starting to, take advantage of that. All the while, there's an actual murderer out there that
Mhm.
possibly is a serial killer that had done some damage like prior in that same thing, and this girl was just a continuation of that pattern.
Yeah. And I want to say, with this being a case that got to the point where it's at now, where it's not proven who it is, but where we know it was not.
Hmm.
This really hits home with the perception aspect of the show, like the fact that they went after this guy of a Muslim descent
Right.
and almost warped the story to make it to where it was him who did it. And it kind of throws that, like, how much can you really trust our justice system? Because we're not bringing justice if we're using racism as a tactic to imprison somebody. And again, they never directly say it, but just based on the testimony and the fact that one thing, as far as the validity in itself, throws out that guy's whole testimony that imprisoned him to begin with. I mean, it's clear, and they didn't do any DNA testing right off the bat. They didn't look at any other suspects, not even close to the depth that they looked at Adnan. So it's like clearly there's more to this, and it fails on our government.
Yeah, and it's like that old saying: "It better that 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to jail." Right.
Right.
And this sounds like this is 100% what that is. It sounds like we got an innocent guy that went to jail because he was guilty of being Muslim at the time, and they had the perfect patsy. And it's easy for this to put the blinders on. It doesn't matter if you've got all this outside noise, as long as they're focused on this. And none of the other evidence was clean. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't clean enough where it's like, we should really look at this guy. The lividity thing, though, like that's too easy to look at, though. That shocks me that the police department was so cavalier about, we don't care about that. And it's like, even a dope like me who, has, I guess, rudimentary medical training on a bunch of different levels knows what I know what lividity looks like. Once you find it, like, reminded me, like, that shit gets messed up because it makes for,
it's basically bruised. Like, your body looks just completely bruised on that side, right?
Oh yeah, it's nightmarish. Like, there have been scenes that I've run on that were bad, and that I know of fellow emergency response workers where, in the winter, there was a story about somebody flipping upside down, and they ran on them, and they'd been out and upside down for, I think it was 2 days, and they had been dead. And when they got there, I mean, you're just, because of the pooling and everything, stuff's just misshapen, and it's like, it's horrible. Okay. And if she was just basically had a layer top to bottom, she was laying flat on her face, straight up. Like,
so in my opinion, like, I don't think that his story matches at all with anything that could have happened.
No, it doesn't. Okay, so this person that owned the car lot,
right?
Were there garages and things on this car lot?
No, it was just empty parking lot.
Huh. Because I'm thinking it just sounds like they drug her into a shed, like they murdered her.
That's what I'm thinking.
Into some sort of storage building that these guys had, and she just laid in. So, but that would explain why in the winter in a storage building, nothing got to her, nothing ate on her, but she stayed intact. And they knew that they had to get rid of the body, took it several hundred yards out into that park, and then all of a sudden this Mr. S calls up.
Yeah, so I mean, with the car in the position that it was, where it looked like it was hot wired, over a parking lot full of grass with fresh grass underneath it.
Right.
I mean, I think that she was buried pretty recent to when she was found. Like, but at the same time, is there a stage where the body is no longer stiff and starts to soften up? Because she was on her side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's after that, like that. After 2 hours, the lockup happens, and then it like basically kind of like a bell curve where it peaks up and then it starts to go away, and then eventually the body goes from rigor to just floppy, doppy.
Right.
It's just loose, right? So, she must have just been face down and then sitting there, and she went, for lack of a better term, soft again, and they picked her up and took her out and dumped her in the woods.
Yeah. They had to store her somewhere pretty, like you said, a shed, somewhere where she was untouched, because all they said was, and any of the information that I read was they pointed out the lividity of the body and the fact that the way she was found in the grave was on her right side, which does not relate to the story or the timeline that Jay gives.
Right. Not to mention the fact that there's no lividity in that portion of her body too.
Right.
Right.
And Jay being a high school stoner, pot dealer, he's probably not smart enough to know that.
No.
So, yeah.
No. It sounds like there's just a lot of people not knowing what the hell they're talking about, right? And making up stories and everything else.
Well, which also puts into play the fact that none of these things were brought up in the trial. Like, none of it. I mean, these are all things that were found out later on, but were not used in the case against Adnan. And he appealed multiple times.
And were they just hidden? How did they find this stuff out? Okay, so how did they find this stuff out after the fact? That's my question. Because
there was both the families were hiring PIs and stuff like that throughout this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Adnan had a very close friend. Her name's like Raquel something. And she was trying to, she was the one who helped like get an attorney and everything involved. And they went through, I think, 3 different attorneys before they got her and stuck with her. But the thing is that they weren't digging. They weren't doing their job and actually looking at these things or requesting these people to come to the stand or anything like that. And then you got the force and the people who did the investigation to begin with, who didn't even give a shit to look into these things. So it makes more. I feel like it's just more proof that they just didn't want to look for anybody else. They wanted it to be Adnan.
Yeah, and I don't want to say prosecutorial misconduct, but I would definitely think that he has a case to sue the first 3 lawyers for. God, gross incompetence, if nothing else. Like,
and he barely I don't even know that he graduated high school. He just got arrested and spent 23 years, and he's still underneath house arrest right now. I mean, he's been robbed of a life. I don't know.
Dude, if you know what, once they clear him, I hope he sues the shit out of the police department, the justice system there, because you can't replace that time he lost. If he's not
the family,
guilty.
Even the family, like when he was arrested, he didn't even he wasn't he was a very calm demeanor. Like, the Lord's he's always going to protect me. It'll be okay. Like, I'm innocent. And the whole time he was in there, he was very adamant about, I'm innocent. It wasn't me. He'd been interviewed many times. There's this podcast called Serial that came out. The first season was all about Adnan's case. But when she actually interviews him, and it almost seems like she picks certain things out of the conversations, like to make it still questionable on if it was him or not. And a lot of the people and the feedback from that series is like, well, why does he sound so calm and all this? And it's like, well, this is a brand new podcast that people don't even really know what podcasts are around. It was like 2013. It's still pretty new. And he'd probably been interviewed numerous times and probably just thought this was another interview because people were like, well, he just didn't even seem to be trying to defend himself in the series. But I mean, again, if I had been interviewed 100,000 times and this was just another interview, probably be, it's the same thing I told him, same thing I told the last guy. I would probably be more annoyed and bugged by it than anything than trying to defend myself. So, but this this podcast Serial got over 100 million downloads for his case.
Oh, Jesus.
And people were very interested. And that's kind of what got his fame on this.
Right. But here's the thing, man. Like, if you ever watch Maury Povich or the Steve Wilkos show, and it used to be Jerry Springer and everything, and they would do the, not the DNA, but the lie detector test, which is just a joke. The guy that invented the damn thing said it was just a trash invention, right? It doesn't work. Right. That's why it's not admissible in court. But these people that are generally found to be lying, not telling the truth, if you want to put any stock in what the machine says, generally they are freaking out and they're saying, no, no, no. And there's like, it's like that old, methinks thou dost protest too much, right?
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, so this guy's calm demeanor, if he's just very stoic and matter of fact, like, no, I didn't do it. Like
Right.
there's no, like it could be, you could lose your shit and just be frothing at the mouth, or you can accept your circumstances and just be like, look, I'm innocent and I'm going to proclaim my innocence until, cooler heads prevail in this thing. I'm
Right.
just shocked that his lawyer, even if he just had a PD, right,
Yeah.
didn't look into every possible option. Or was it a thing where
Maybe they were the same way. Maybe they were prejudiced.
prejudice,
Oh,
or did
race.
they, but you know what I mean? Like wanting to just make this thing go away. Like
Right.
this nice girl has been murdered. We've got this horrible Muslim threat that we've
Yeah.
captured. So let's button this up, right?
Right.
Because oh,
Yeah.
dude,
It was an intense case, and actually I had two other ones that I had been researching, and then this somebody mentioned it to me. So, and actually the person who told me about it, his like my wife and I both have really been into this case because she's like, pro that he's innocent, and I think he did it. And so I listened to some stuff and I was like, no, I mean, just based on like some of the facts behind like the status of the car, and really what I focused on, what got him thrown in prison and how inaccurate that information was, because
right.
if we're basing it specifically off that, he should have never got arrested because none of it lines up.
They had no reason to. I mean, they had a reason,
Yeah.
but they had no, I think, legal basis.
Scorned lover, mad at his ex, decided to kill her, and that's what he's Muslim. So let's do it.
Oh God, if that's the foundational reasoning that they use to put somebody in jail, lock us all up.
Right.
Right. If somebody kills an ex of ours, we'll all go to jail.
Right. But yeah, that's what I got for today's episode of Singed Eye Sockets, everybody. I really enjoy doing a lot of the research that I've been doing for these cases, and I never give away too much because I feel like if you guys are really interested in the case, you'll go look more into it, which is fine. That's kind of what I want. This is all about perception. It's all about me just presenting some facts and getting the interpretation of the audience and I guess. And I think you and I kind of agree that I don't think Adnan did it. I actually don't think that Jay did it. I think it's whoever the DNA that they got.
Mm-hmm.
It was one or both of them.
Dude, it's an A therefore B thing. Like I am, as soon as you said that it was not broken off, because that's why I did this motion. When you said that, I was like, oh, it got broken off. You said, no, it was removed because that's how you get to that thing. It's like, and these are the guys that would have that knowledge.
Right.
Like, dude, what are they? I mean,
and who would, if anybody's going to know, maybe the drug dealer, the one who admitted that he had some connections, probably knows some people who know some stuff, which would relate to this. So, and the fact that Jay knew where the car was, because he's the one who reported where the car was. So if the car was moved there, somebody had to at least tip Jay off. And even if it wasn't the person who did it, it could have been the cops or something. If they're involved in him fabricating a story, they could have found the car and be like, hey, you're going to say this.
But what's the motive? That's the thing.
There's I don't know.
You talk about, one of the things, that they use a lot of time to zero in on who it's any killing, who benefits from the death. All right. If it's not a murder of passion, self-defense, then it's like follow who benefits the most from the thing. And really, Adnan doesn't truly benefit from it. I mean, yeah, you're mad, so you get a little bit of I guess, like a endorphins, right? You get a dopamine kick. She's dead. Gotcha, bitch. I
Yeah.
mean, right? But
Yeah.
that's not really motive.
The only thing that I got out of this that was a little bit, but not even really that much, like, oh, maybe, was that a lot of people reported that Adnan wasn't even like looking for her. But he said that their whole group of friends was looking into it. So he's like, I'd just be one extra person.
Right. But again, going back to the fact that he might have just been like, they were broken up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he might have been done with her,
Yeah.
sour grapes. You know what?
Yeah.
She's gone. I mean, yeah, I'll help, but like, she was a bitch. I mean, that might have been his perspective. But at the same time, you also said, like, he was at the library.
Right.
Yeah. He could have been
with an alibi who they didn't even bring to the stand.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's like that. There are so many things that just point away from this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, I just don't think he had a motive. It just does not seem like it's something where I would point any sort of finger at him.
Right.
And I have a hard time believing Jay or Don did it with their loosely manufactured whatever.
Hey, for all we know, it could have been Adnan's family. They didn't like the fact that they were together anyways.
It's entirely possible.
I actually don't think they did, but I'm just saying.
She was a whore.
No, so the DNA and based on the fact that the DNA that they did find on the bodies and it being people who are imprisoned for rape and something else, like, and they don't even give like evidence of who it is. Like this was, so again, they found this DNA in 2013, so years ago. This could have been closed years ago. But when Adnan filed an appeal recently in the courts, this information was requested, and that's how they found out. But why so far late? Like, I still don't understand why it took so long for something that was there the whole time.
Look at who's involved. Maybe they were a detective back in the day, but they might be chief of police now. They might be a district attorney.
Right.
Who loses by this information coming out?
Right.
Look, man, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right. And you have people in positions where they're going to lose their job, lose their way of life, lose their power, which they may covet. They're going to do whatever they can to make this thing go away quietly and as quickly as possible.
Right.
That's my guess. So this sounds like a convergence of a bunch of bullshit where, yes, you know what I mean? Like, people are covering and people are, like all these different stories. And it's just simply a matter of this girl came afoul of a serial rapist and murderer.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are trying to cover their ass. They were trying to cover their ass back then. And if it got out now that there was malfeasance, right?
Right.
Then that, and God knows, and it could be a domino effect, because then, you could look at all about, like, well, if they did it here, then they probably didn't do their job on these other cases. And now all of these appeals start happening.
Right.
Right. So that it can be somewhat disastrous, but shame on them. Shame on them if they were, officers of the court in the various jobs that they had, and they did what they did, because it's their fault that this is where it's at now. And this guy lost 23 years of his life.
Right. And he even still came out calm when he got released. He was calm. He had a smile on his face. I mean, the only people crying were his family and friends.
This guy's probably just a cool cat. When she broke up with him, he's probably just like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
All right, people. Again, another episode of Singed Eye Sockets is done. I hope you guys enjoy all these episodes. Hey, I know you guys have been watching, because there's been people watching this whole episode.
Cool,
again,
man.
comments are there to be utilized, guys. You know, I love to involve the audience into the shows, especially that's why I do them live. But even if you just want to watch, I appreciate you guys. So until next time, Sean, thank you for coming on tonight,
Always happy to be here, man.
and we'll see you guys around.